What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast as part of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I am your host, Numac, and once again, joining me for a little bit of Packers talk in this now dreadful offseason is my co-host, Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
Hello, hello. How are you? I didn't answer your question. I answered your question with a question that I literally just stole from you.
Just deflected so hard. It's
Exactly.
not a dreadful offseason. I should re-speak. Just a now very long offseason. I'm dreading having to go through this now actual part of the offseason.
Just stating. We went through the longest trades. It wasn't long.
That's pretty
But
long.
it was long, but it felt like it was delaying the inevitable.
Right.
And we want that instant
Yeah, I want the instant
gratification.
gratification that comes with having a new quarterback at the helm. And now we just need to
Exactly.
talk about stuff that happens, which apparently is assistant media days. And
Yeah.
I haven't even paid
Yeah.
attention to those in past years because, like, right now baseball's
Everything's
on.
so new.
Go check out Cruising for
Yeah.
a Bruising. That's what I'm focused on usually this time of year. But instead, we're bringing you the latest and greatest from 1265 Lombardi Avenue. But
Yeah.
first and foremost, couple of news items coming out of the Packers this week. I think it was last week, like Friday or over the
Yes.
weekend.
Yeah.
The Packers signed Jonathan Owens, a safety from the Houston Texans. Obviously, we've talked about safety ad nauseum this offseason. Definitely a need for the defensive side of the ball. Packers go out and sign. I'm not going to call him a veteran because he only had played 31 games in his career, and really had the only significant full season was last year with Houston, where he had 125 total tackles, 84 of those being solo, and one QB hit to go with four pass deflections. So a little bit of depth. Packers Twitter appropriately freaked out when they found out that Olympian Simone Biles is the wife of Jonathan Owens, and she was already donning Packers gear. So I think that might have gotten more publicity than the actual Jonathan Owens signing. But we'll take what we can get this time of the offseason.
Yeah, it was definitely I think the Packers were looking at a double experience of like, yeah, we got safety depth, we got Jonathan Owens, an NFL player, and then we got arguably the greatest athlete of this century
Yeah, one of the most
to be.
decorated Olympic athletes ever.
Everybody wanted JJ Watt and the hometown kids that are playing. We got Simone Biles now.
Yes, we do.
We got her in our corner because Jonathan Owens is on the team. Yeah,
For
that's
now.
where we stand. That is actually, I think that was my caveat of like, oh, that's great. Does he make the team?
Right. If he doesn't make the team, it's kind of all for nothing. We had a fun day on Twitter. Kind of this is what we get out of that, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I hope he does well. He came out. He was an undrafted free agent out of Missouri Western State to the Arizona Cardinals. He was on and off their practice squad for the first 2 years of his career, or that's first year. He was in 2018. Never actually played a game with them. He was signed, then waived a month later in June of 2018, then placed on IR, then placed on IR again in September, and then he got waived August of next year in 2019. Had a bunch of tryouts, including with the Houston Texans, where he ultimately signed to their practice squad before being placed on IR, if you could believe it or not, at the end of last year. So, seems like has a little bit of injuries. He didn't have too many IR injuries from between signing with the Houston Texans in 2019 and the end of last year, but played in one game in 2019, six in 2020. He didn't record a stat in either one of those seasons, despite having one missed tackle in his 6 games in 2020. 2021, he started 2 games, had one interception in 7 games played, and did pretty fairly well for what you want to call a backup safety. And then, like I said, played and started all 17 games last year. Had 42 targets on 20 completions. I apologize, on 42 targets with his receiver he was covering. So only 3 touchdowns led up, but the QB rating was pretty skyrocketing high for him at 128.5, according to Pro Football Reference.
Houston Texans football.
Notably,
Yeah,
really good last year.
yes, but Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that the Packers have certainly looked for guys like Rudy Ford, Tarvarius Moore earlier this offseason. They're trying to find these like I don't, bounce back kind of clearly journeyman special teamers, guys that have risen through the ranks, whether it's going undrafted and battling through injury and stuff like that, and trying to find kind of these diamonds in the rough, if you will. Obviously, we've talked plenty about Adrian Amos and the door, as we will get into with Mason Crosby and other things going on in Packerland. Doors never quite closed. All these doors are still open.
What a
Um,
great segue. Unless you have more. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that all of the attention was like, oh, maybe they'll bring back Adrian Amos post draft because Anthony Johnson was, late, very late, the last round draft pick, and it's still so unsettled. It's one of, I mean, last couple of weeks we talked plenty about how it is the probably the most glaring issue on the team currently, and based on their choices and stuff like that right now, even with some desirable options out there in free agency, including Adrian Amos, they are not making that call yet.
Right.
And so we'll see. We'll see what ultimately happens and see if they're basically guys like Adrian Amos, John Johnson, I think is still available too. He's kind of like another veteran guy that caught my eye. But yeah, I think the Packers are very comfortable with where they're at, even if that makes us uncomfortable.
Right. I think if we're like super jumping the gun, we'll probably see um, them maybe pick up a safety towards the end of training camp when teams start cutting guys. Like I would imagine that's kind of maybe their plan.
That's how they got Rudy Ford too,
Yeah.
right? He was like a cut from the Jaguars, if I remember correctly,
Yeah. I th- was it the Jaguars or the
during
Giants?
preseason.
Was it Jaguars or the Giants?
Let me look.
Um, but that being said, like that's obviously a gamble to kind of play your season or you guys play with your defense and your starters around that strategy to wait until someone maybe gets cut. But yeah, like you said, John Johnson's still available from Cleveland. Old Devin McCourty, but I think we had talked about him. I think he might
I think
be
he's retired.
retired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Rudy Ford was cut by the Jaguars on
Jaguars.
August 29th, and the
Yeah.
Packers signed him 2 days later.
Yeah. So there's options. There's people out there, regardless. But talking about doors not being closed and that segue I had mentioned earlier, with the signing of Jonathan Owens, obviously came with his wife Simone Biles. We talked about that already. Mason Crosby's wife, who I probably should know the name of if I can search it quick, tweeted
Molly?
Molly, yeah, tweeted at Simone Biles when they announced that they would be in Green Bay. Said that she loved the team and everything else. I'll just read the tweet. Oop, it got deleted. It seems. I'll have to read the article. Quote: Sad, we will miss you. We just ended a 16-year run with the team. That being said, I've got some stuff I need to share with you. Little city with a big heart and some amazing stores and restaurants. We loved our time there, and so will you. Let's talk coats, boots, custom Packers gear, etc. Coming from Mason Crosby's wife, Molly, which seems to be that the indicator that the Packers moved on from Mason Crosby. But um, take that with a grain of salt, as on Tuesday, I believe, was when they spoke. Special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia talked with the media and said that the door isn't exactly 100% closed on Mason Crosby. Quote, the door's not closed. He's not on anybody's team yet, end quote. But this is from Rob Dombrowski. But it's also worth noting that he said they're prepared to, quote, weather the storm to some degree, end quote, with sixth-round kicker Anders Carlson. So, kind of seems like they might ride this out through training camp and see how Anders kicks. And if it's bad, they might bring Mason Crosby back. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting with that.
Big question for you because I saw this, I perused Packers Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the general topic of keeping the door open for veterans. Crosby, Amos, um, I mean, kind of goes on and on with non Aaron Rodgers edition. But when the Packers move on from someone, they don't really say that they move on. What's your take? What's your take here, Numac?
Um, I think it's professional, honestly. Like, especially with like Adrian Amos and Mason Crosby. I'd assume for Crosby, it's more of a like how badly do they want him back kind of thing versus a money thing. And he's just been playing forever. This might look at retirement too, but as I think it's different between a guy like Mason Crosby and Adrian Amos. Um, for Amos, I'm guessing it's more of a contract issue. He wants to get more money than the Packers are willing to offer him. And for Crosby, I think it's just like, okay, you're at the sunset of your career. We'll give you like the minimum because he's been good. He's been all right. He hasn't been like elite and doesn't have the distance to go 50 yards plus anymore. He's not with any consistency. And so it's probably just a disagreement between the value that they want to give Mason Crosby versus just like seeing if he'll retire versus telling Adrian Amos, hey, we would love to have you back, but we don't want you more than this amount. Like, I don't think they really care if they get Adrian Amos back because he had an okay year last year, and they might just want to roll the dice with whatever young guys they have, understanding that this might be a time to see what they just have at safety and how much they need to invest in it, as opposed to Mason Crosby, who they know they won't have for the next five,
Ever.
10 years. And it's just like, hey, let's just draft a new guy, see if he can. I think I forget where I saw it, but he did some work with one of like the kicking gurus in college. Anders Carlson did, and so if that's the case, and they can get him back on track, that's a just fine draft pick, and they can move on from Mason Crosby and find a guy who can kick a little further. So as far as the Packers not saying they're totally done with the guy, I generally don't like that when any organization does in the first place. Like, it's kind of a weird look to have organization.
You
Like,
don't want
yeah,
a Dylan
we're
Brooks
done.
situation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't want
That
Packers to
is
be like,
that
yeah,
is the
we're
extreme opposite,
right. We don't
obviously.
like the Packers. If the Packers came out and be like, yeah, we're not signing Mason, all the best to him. It's like, oh, that's kind of a harsh way
Cold.
to send out your all-time leading point scorer and 16-year franchise kicker. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's better that they're just saying like, hey, he's not on another team yet. We haven't closed off that option. If they need an emergency kicker, they'll probably bring him back. So yeah,
Plus,
I'm fine with it. It just doesn't stir the pot at all, which is the exact probably the words on the wall when when Packers employees walk into the office on Monday morning. Don't stir the pot.
yeah, I think there's two things here. One is that the Packers are already so fresh faced and young at this point with the
Yeah,
roster turnover that they can kind of squeeze in the Mason Crosby, Anders Carlson, whatever thing, and just be like, that's part of what we're doing here.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we're changing it over. We're not rebuilding, we're retooling.
yeah,
Secondly, I think ultimately where people get a little kind of miffed about this is that when it's in the case of the safety position and that, they have signed these guys, but they're not committing significant resources to Jonathan Owens or to Taveri Smart. They're essentially 1 year, $1 million year flyers.
right.
So they keep saying that we're not going to shut the door on these players, it's like, well, if you're shutting the door on a player that could absolutely help you and give you a little bit more cover, rather than like they weren't saying this about whoever Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith were taking over when they were making free agency splashes 5 years ago or 4 years ago. You know what I mean? It's a little different when the actions don't necessarily, or am I saying that correctly? The actions don't match up with the words,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's where it's like those comments and stuff like that. I'm just like, we're never going to say no to anybody. It sits differently when it's like, well, that feels like the position that needs the most improvement, kind of thing.
Right.
But I understand you're never going to be like, there's never going to be a Dylan Brooks situation with this team or
Right.
any that is a very extreme example,
Yeah,
but
something really bad would have to happen for them to be like,
exactly like
yeah,
that. Yeah, we've seen players have bad blood. I mean, we just went through it with Aaron Rodgers,
right,
even on a different scale, but like it wasn't in a way where like Aaron Rodgers is never playing for this team again. You know what I mean? It was still just like you never know what's going to happen.
right. Um, for what it's worth, still a very like young team, and I think that's part of it too. Is like they're just entering a new era of Packers football where you're not going to have guys that are like just hard nosed veterans from like pretty much the tens decade. Um, the most experienced guy on this team is David Bakhtiari at 11. He's the oldest or second oldest person on the team behind Pat O'Donnell. Pat O'Donnell's 32, Bakhtiari's 31. Like
Yeah,
Crosby was pushing 40, and that's a
he's bringing up that median age like 5 years.
right. And the Packers in general have three guys on their roster that are older that are 30 plus. It's Pat O'Donnell, David Bakhtiari, and Preston Smith. And then the next oldest is uh Devondre Campbell at 29. And so it's just a young team. And
Yeah,
I think they're just ready to be a younger team and kind of find their new identity with a new set of culture with those players. Like I think if Mason Crosby was an all pro type of kicker like David Bakhtiari is at his position, they probably would have kept him around at his age. Um, but he's not.
yeah,
And like the only part of the I guess Aaron Rodgers culture era left is David Bakhtiari. He's around because of that all pro tackle um, skill he has. Mason Crosby
well,
kind of
he's also around because they
decided
big
to
contract too.
right. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But they could have traded him away, right? Like they could trade David Bakhtiari today and get a good return for him, like without a doubt. I mean, he played well last year. He was healthy most of last year.
Yes, yes. I
I
think a
think.
lot of teams would be asking what happened with his knee,
Oh
and
yeah, without a doubt, and his back for that
yeah,
matter. But you could,
yeah,
I think
that's
you could
true.
go out and get like a second or third for him. But we're not talking about that right now. The point being is that yes, Mason Crosby has been on this team for as long as Aaron Rodgers has. I think even a couple years shorter, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and so he just was part of the culture that went through three head coaches, I'm not mistaken. I think Mason Crosby might have been around for the last, like the first year before McCarthy. Um,
No, he wasn't.
he wasn't. So yeah, just well, the entirety of the McCarthy era, and then
Yeah,
now the Matt LaFleur
Lafleur.
era. But he's been
Yeah,
around a long time, and so yeah, it sucks to see him go if he ends up staying away. But I also don't disagree that this is just kind of the way the team is going at this point.
yeah, same. It, it's kind of invigorating to be honest. As much not, it's different with Mason Crosby because he was very good for a very long
Hmm.
time, and that you just like he could be the Bears with Robbie Gould, but you
And the
don't take those
Niners,
things. That too, yeah, that's right. You don't take those things for granted.
no.
So, but
That's
it
not to
is
say
kind of
that's not to say I don't think he's not appreciated. I just think that the
no,
Packers are
I
ready to turn the page.
yeah, exactly. You want to get ahead of a kicker kind of losing it rather than
It's and they might, I don't think they're doing this in the first place, but like it's easier optically to let him walk in the offseason than
yep,
him kick in the middle of the season when they're trying to win games
yep.
and it just be clearly that he doesn't have it anymore. And then it's like, oh, Packers
And I
cut Mason Crosby clearly because he sucks. Just like, oh,
yeah,
no.
they had clear opportunities that where that could have happened, and they stuck by them, and
Right.
it ultimately paid off.
Hmm.
Other teams can do that, and Andrews Carlson's brother knows very well how that is, and then thrived elsewhere. So
Right.
you know,
Yeah, we'll see. Um, I think that's enough on Mason Crosby and Jonathan Owens. 20 minutes.
that's enough.
Um, other brief news: Packers tried out Kiki Kuti, I think former Texans wide receiver.
Colts, I believe, too.
I think so. That sounds about right. Just a pretty much fourth wide receiver on most teams. Was drafted in the fourth round in 2018 by the Texans, and he spent his last 2 years in Indianapolis. You're right. So His last 2 years, he had 2 total targets and 2 total receptions in 8 in 10 games total. So take that how you may, but he was fine. His 3 years in Houston, like I said, kind of always that third, fourth string receiver behind DeAndre Hopkins and whoever else was there during that time. But
Randall Cobb.
yep, I think that was part of that time too.
Mhm.
But in Houston, he had 4 touchdowns for a little over 800 yards, almost 900. So just a depth option essentially. But they didn't sign him; they tried him out essentially. So we'll see how that goes. A lot of talk about the receivers this week, which we'll get into in a second. We talk into assistant comments, but I guess we'll see how what his options are. He could also be like a special teams guy, his punt return experience. So we'll see.
Yep. Could this be another D.D. Westbrook situation? Remember
I
when he was on the team?
certainly could be
Yeah.
another kind of wide receiver 4 option that just happened to try out for the Packers. So probably practice squad guy if anything. But given all the receiving options they took on in the offseason, I don't know what their really plan is for that. So maybe just training camp competition, something like that.
Yeah.
So should we get into assistant comments?
Let's get into it.
Dope. Coaching assistant media week is apparently a thing. Packers had all their assistants speak Tuesday, Wednesday, and today, which is Thursday, if you can use context clues. And they kind of went in, I guess, more importance of order, kind of. Tuesday was the main guys, Adam Stenavich, Joe Barry, and Rich Bisaccia, as we mentioned. Wednesday was all the defensive assistants, which we'll go through in a minute. And then today, Thursday, was all the offensive assistants. So we'll go in chronological order. Start with Adam Stenavich. He didn't really have too much to say. But notably talked about that how Jordan Love will have an open playbook pretty much all season long. And that,
Better be.
well, yeah. Well,
I know. I'm sorry.
no, you're good. We can probably can touch on it a little bit briefly with some comments from Tom
What is
Clemens.
that playbook going to be closed? How's he going to learn?
You got it. Tom Clemens spoke to the media today and mentioned how Love knew the game plan all last year, whether he was playing or not. He just came prepared and was ready to know what Rodgers was doing in case he needed to go in. So seems like he was readily prepared to jump in at any moment last year, and I think they're just kind of going to throw him into the offense as desired by Matt LaFleur into training camp and into the first week of the season, which is obviously still 4 months away. But I think if there's anything to expect this training camp and first couple weeks of season, is that Jordan Love shouldn't be like struggling to run a variety of plays in this offense.
And given the nature of Aaron Rodgers' thumb injury, which we certainly got tired of over the course of the season, but there were some weeks where it was legitimately talked about as, well, Jordan Love's getting the first team reps, especially in light of that London game. Like, I'm sure that they had a possibility of like, well, we might have to turn to Jordan Love.
Right.
And then, yeah. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that he was very much all in, and obviously everything that we talked about in terms of mentality, being prepared, all that stuff, like that factored into, being always ready. But yeah, very encouraging to hear someone like Tom Clements, who I mean, obviously you just so super associate him with Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So to talk about someone else and how he's very thrilled to be with this opportunity to develop Jordan Love.
Right. I think Bill
adds to the invigoration of the season.
Right. Bill Huber wrote a story for Packer Central, his Sports Illustrated affiliate, talking about how the reason that Tom Clements came back to the Packers was to try and win another Super Bowl and coach Aaron Rodgers. This is what pretty much he was quoted saying on today, Thursday, but says, quote, "But I came back and I enjoyed working with Jordan and Danny Etling. And anytime you can coach a guy and you think you can help him, it looks like you've helped him a little bit. That's gratifying." So it's at least encouraging to see that he's not just dipping once Rodgers leaves, because like he was like Rodgers' guy, right? Is that he just wanted to coach Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers wanted to be coached by Tom Clements. So to see his buy-in with this next era of quarterback, and to see him shepherding essentially the Packers into this new era with Jordan Love is good. I'm hoping that we get to see a lot of that good production and development with Jordan Love throughout the year under Tom Clements' tutelage.
Yeah.
Another comment from Adam Stenovich, one that I thought was quite interesting. I guess one more thing on Jordan Love. This is a continuation of Stanovich's thoughts that the experience on the offensive line and at running back could be key for Jordan Love, who's likely to be blitzed early. Quote, typically, if you handle pressure well, you won't see it. So I think that is, I agree a lot with that, is that it kind of talked to what Aaron Jones said last week about how he's just ready to lead and people listen to him when he talks. I think that he'll be picked up early, depending on how much they do get after Jordan Love. He's semi-mobile. He's shown a little bit of his running in the games we've seen, but he's not like he's Lamar Jackson or anything, or
No, but
Josh Allen for that matter too.
yeah, just being elusive and
Yeah.
kind of sensing when the walls are crumbling, kind of thing.
But it's really awesome that they have Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, who have years of pass blocking experience, to really pick him up and pick up those blitz when needed, so he can stay in the pocket and pass. So,
Yeah.
one interesting tidbit that was noted that Stenovich said Zach Tom will compete. It says complete, but I'm pretty sure Rob Dvoski means compete. Will compete at right guard, right tackle, and possibly even center. The only set spots on the line are David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, which tracks.
Sounds about right.
Which
Yeah.
tracks.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense. We're gonna jump around a little bit. We're not gonna go chronological. I lied.
No, that's fine.
Today, Luke Butkus, the old line coach for the Packers, talked about Josh Myers and said that he has no concerns with Josh Myers struggling this year, or last year rather, and said that 2022 was effectively his rookie year, and because he only played 7 games as a rookie in 21. Quote, hell of a kid, hell of a player, and we expect him to be here for a long time. So maybe as Zach Tom as a center for Josh Myers, but I wouldn't, after these comments, expect Tom to beat out Myers as the starting center, despite having experience there in college.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another part from him, I guess maybe I didn't get it. I thought I had a Sean Ryan quote, but I must have missed it. So my apologies on that. Basically, that they're working with Sean Ryan was what I saw on the old Twitter machine. Moving on to Joe Barry, his comments. His biggest thing for Devontae Wyatt, my large adult son. What do you want to see from 2022 first-round pick Devontae Wyatt? Quote, disruption. An all-around disruptive player. I always like to see what guys do in that time frame from year 1 to year 2. Yeah, I'd say that's about appropriate.
That's what that is what's gonna get you on the field, clearly. And you have plenty of opportunity to.
Right.
Yeah. Simple as that.
Jerry Montgomery, the D-line coach and run game coordinator on Devontae Wyatt, said, quote, I expect a massive jump from him. He knows the defense much better, which is what we saw towards the end of the year. This is a notable quote. Mentioned the sack versus Detroit, and Wyatt came back to the sideline and said, quote, Coach, I'm starting to get it. So I think this is a really important moment for us as fans to recognize that, hey, these guys are rookies. Not all rookies jump into the NFL and produce right away. And I think that is a great little tidbit to share, that not every rookie can be Aiden Hutchinson, or not every rookie can be Quay Walker and be ready to just hop into the role that they're expected to play every year and produce. He needed to learn the ins and outs of the trenches of the NFL, which is a big difference from college to the NFL.
And he had the unfair distinction of being a 24-year-old rookie, where everybody's like, well, that means he's experienced. And, he doesn't have as much of a learning curve athletically or getting down plays and stuff like that. It's like, It doesn't work that way. It rarely does. Progress is not always linear. if it ever is.
Progress is never
So
linear, and
yeah,
I think I saw um, Derrick Henry talking with Taylor Lewin and that other guy on their podcast on the bus. Forget what that podcast is called every time. I apologize. Um, but they asked him like, everyone talks about how Derrick Henry was such a force in high school and college. Is like, how difficult was the transition from college to NFL for Derrick Henry, one of the most powerful running backs in the league? He goes, "Oh, it's way different. Like, it's not even close."
yeah,
And this is a guy coming from who was
Alabama.
Alabama, who's with Georgia in the SEC. So it's just all the more anecdotal knowledge to say, hey, this stuff's hard, dude. Like the schemes, the just sheer power of these guys having professional weight stuff and locker room stuff. It's just really incredibly like hard to go from one spot to the other.
Hmm.
So, um, moving on. Let's see. Trying to see. Oh, safety. We talked about them already, but Joe Barry already said they don't really know who's going to start next to Darnell Savage. What is your first inclination for that? I guess that you're laughing. You're
I think
laughing,
that's
but
what it is. Not really sure. I mean that kind of tracks again. It's what you invested in the position and what you've addressed, even with a tighter cap space and cap maneuvering that they've had to do plenty this offseason before Aaron Rodgers got traded. It's like, yeah, you don't really know. It's gonna be a fluid situation probably, more than anything it's until you get a bona fide like this guy is gonna be our starting safety for the next 10 years.
Mhm.
It will be a question on the roster till then. Till
Right.
that's sorted.
Yeah, I think hopefully they sort it after this year, if we'll at least have an answer. But yeah, I think it's going to be probably the discussion of training camp.
Yep.
Another thing from Barry on last year's slow start, quote, inconsistency. We can't be up next week and down the next, or 1 week and then down the next. We don't have time to waste 10 weeks of the season before playing well. And it's kind of hard to take that comment seriously, knowing what we know about just Joe Barry's game planning and sort of, hey, Joe, it's your job to make sure that these players are consistent and that you're scheming up game plans to stop what needs to be stopped. And like I think as much as it was a story that he just let Jair and Razul figure out who was covering Justin Jefferson in the second Vikings game, it's not how that should work. Like he should be coaching directly to what needs to happen and putting these game plans together. Like inconsistency comes from being inconsistently coached, in my opinion.
So, okay. We might have found something meaty to talk about here.
Okay.
That was a very 2022 Packers problem because it obviously was the 2022 season.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at that defense and the overall roster and stuff like that, yeah, there are some pillars that are. Preston Smith is still there. Darnell Savage is still there, and he's not old, but 5 years, 4 years has been in the league,
Mm-hmm.
played in Green Bay, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Devondre Campbell, all this stuff. The oldest players on the roster are on that side of the ball currently.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a very young Packers defense, and they're expecting a lot of jumps from a lot of different players, some of whom could be rookies that they're expecting this from.
Yeah.
So my question to you,
Okay.
everybody was on Joe Barry by the end of last season. It was quite
Including
surprising.
us.
Yes, quite surprising to see the Packers stick with him.
Yep.
But that quote is actually going to happen again this year because it's rookies, it's second year players, it's guys on rookie scale contracts.
Right.
Those are the people that are going to get the most reps, knock on wood, and help providing.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, yeah, like you don't want to see a consistency. You want to see these players kind of get to it very quickly. But we're talking again how we're talking about Devontae Wyatt. That is going to happen without I can name 6 guys right now that could easily happen to you. Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary when he gets back. Um, well, now I'm losing my train of thought. Quay
Cloud
Walker.
brain, right?
Um, like Eric Stokes when he's healthy. Like that's the thing is that like yeah, there are pillars on the Packers defense that are more
Hmm.
veteran or have been, you know, have a couple years on their under their belt.
Yep.
But I don't I those excuses didn't fly last year, and it's part of why it's still like a sore spot of like, oh, is Joe Barry the guy to really organize this defense?
Yeah.
Whereas like in reality, he might have more of a leash because the Packers roster is so young now. Do you know what I'm trying to say here?
I kind of, but I don't think I agree. Like, I think I get what you're saying. I
Yeah.
just don't agree that they're young enough to blame them for inconsistencies. Like, because you have experienced players on, like, your starting 11 man defense, and Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, uh, Jair
I forgot about Kenny.
Alexander, and I guess we'll go Darnell Savage. That's
He's starting.
four. Four um, starters that are essentially just ready to go and all pro level play. I shouldn't say all pro. Darnell Savage isn't all pro, but players that should be able to lead the other people around their units on defense. Essentially, like yes, they're young in spots, but it was more than just those young spots last year. That was the problem.
Oh, of course. I completely agree, and that still might be the problem. If Jair has another inconsistency or inconsistent year, Kenny Clark kind of was slow to get going and stuff like that. There are key players that if they don't have their best years under Joe Barry and the defense is still a sieve and it's still the same things that we talked about with the Packers defense for the last 2 years since
Right.
Joe Barry got the job, you know, I I don't see him shepherding this team again um beyond this year, but I don't know. That's where I get a little bit like you don't really know.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I think anything that resembles the defense of last year is going to be like his last year in Green Bay. There has to be a clear sign of improvement, and a lot of these issues that we talked about ad nauseum last year and but early part of this offseason, they just have to not repeat themselves
And
again.
and plus two, like I guess to be devil's advocate to my own words, if your rookies or guys like Devontae Wyatt, if they don't take that leap or if they're not getting to overcoming that learning curve and they're not developing them right,
Right.
then Joe Barry is definitely not the person that can really take this defense over the top because
Exactly.
it's such a critical time to put this roster together.
Right. Right. And to that point too, it's just that you had a year where their defense was not good. It was
No, well,
10
you
weeks
could
where it
argue
was 10
the
weeks
year
where it was
before wasn't that great either.
right. He should be learning from these mistakes. He should be seeing what went wrong and fixing it. And if you're in this spot for what would now be then 3 years and there's nothing changing, you're probably not the guy for the job.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up Joe Barry's comments. I think that's all from the major guys, the three coordinators. Um, Couple things on. I guess we'll start with Quay. Quay has been kind of the topic of conversation after his unfortunate end to the season last year with his shoving of another coach on the sideline after he did it in Buffalo a few weeks prior to that. Um, but Rob Dombrowski was reporting today or yesterday, I apologize, Wednesday, that the inside linebackers coach Kirk Al-Baghdadi made it sound like he had spent a lot of time talking with Quay Walker about his two ejections last year, and as a rookie, quote, those conversations are ongoing, and he's more than willing to learn from all of his mistakes. So it seems like the conversations with Quay this offseason have been present this offseason to make sure, hey, you're a rookie, that crap don't fly to begin with, but it's especially not going to fly now moving on into your second year and onward.
Good.
Good is
Good.
right.
Yeah.
Um, But to go with that, Jason Robovich, he's the pass rush game coordinator or assistant rather. Um, and someone had asked how they see Quay fitting into the pass rush, and he just said yes. Like they're gonna be playing him inside, outside, and pretty much all over the box this season. It seems like so. Keep an eye out for Quay Walker being played pretty much all across the line and all across the middle of the field, which is what he did last year.
Very excited.
Yeah, might turn into like a half of the time pass rusher. Makes it seem like so. Could we see him
Moonlighting.
moonlighting as a pass rusher? Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Um, Switching over to the other side of the ball, sort of wrapping up the major comments that we saw. Um, Jason Vrabel, the wide receiver coach, talked about how the Packers don't have a so-called veteran in the wide receiver room, but that Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs played a lot of snaps as rookies. 540, 529 for Romeo Dobbs and 507 for Christian Watson. So not necessarily blowing my socks off type of stat numbers, but more than a few veterans that played last year too, which is like which is what Jason Vrabel's point was. He said, "quote Christian and Romeo played so much as rookies that there's guys in year 3 or 4 that some people consider vets that have less snaps. Like Kiki Cootie is one of those examples. Not a
That is
veteran,
true.
not a guy you'd consider like a veteran, but a guy who's been in the league for 5 years that doesn't have probably as many snaps as either of those guys.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think they step up. Hopefully, I think this is like him kind of calling on them to be the leaders in the locker room, or in that I guess in that group per se. And here's hoping they do it. Samari Toure, last year's 7th round pick, getting thick, added 10 pounds of muscle this offseason apparently. Vrabel said that he like most people wouldn't recognize him. They walked back in like he's added 8 to 10 pounds of muscle to get up to about 6 feet 6'1", 200 pounds. So he might be a force to be reckoned with in training camp this year. If he can end up getting his movements down, getting his sort of route running down, he might be an asset.
No more Captain Cool, as Aaron Rodgers once called him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um. Oh, here was the Sean Ryan bit I had found. Um. This was from Luke Buckus again. He called him a guard, but will take some center snaps this spring. So I'm not really sure how that will fit with Josh Myers, but maybe they're retooling, kind of throwing stuff around to see, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
Where, yeah, yeah. I was about to say the same thing.
Packers tight end coach John Dunn mentioned to the media that Josiah DeGuara has taken on the leadership role in the tight end room, which is an interesting role for him to play, considering he wasn't the most active player on the field. But I like the initiative, truthfully.
It He's someone that's always intrigued me because I think he's ultimately going to be a useful player if he can put everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Health also, that was probably the biggest stumbling block the first 2 years of his career.
Right,
But yeah, he's a useful player, and there's a reason why the Packers drafted him as high as they did.
right.
Um, in the Love draft, AJ Dillon draft too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, would be nice if that all can click together for him. The top three or 20.
Yeah,
That's what I call them.
that'd be nice if we can get
Three
all there.
amigos.
Sure. Um, Tight end coach John Dunn also said that the rookies Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft have more similarities than differences right now in terms of body type, speed, bigger guys,
No shit.
longer, run well, and smart. So um, he said we'll just have to see where it takes us. Which like if you have two
Yeah.
guys that can be offensive weapons like that, like you can just swap one up for the other. It's not a bad thing to have considering their skill sets.
Yeah, they're to quote Succession, they're the disgusting brothers. That's what they are.
Sure,
I don't know.
we can go with that.
we're
You heard it.
workshopping nicknames here.
You heard it here first, folks. Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, the Disgusting Brothers.
Oh, that's
Um,
funny.
Anything else on the comments from the assistants that you want to talk about? Because I think that was pretty much all of the highlights.
No, I mean, it is what it is at this point. We're May 18th as we're recording. We're
Yep.
Draft is settled. You're looking at the roster. You're looking at anything to like give you hope, and obviously there's plenty of time until first preseason game, which got settled this week too, right?
Like what when it is.
Yes, I think I can
I
bring it
think we
up
knew the
here.
opponent. I don't know if we knew the time. I can check quick for you though.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
They play the Bengals on Friday, August 11th at 6 p.m. The Patriots away against the Bengals. The Patriots and Seahawks at home to finish out weeks 2 and 3 of the preseason. Saturday, August 19th at 7, and Saturday, August 26th at noon. So, yeah, three three games that would be good if they weren't preseason, but
But it
alas,
gives you, but it's, I mean,
I think it is worth noting, depending on how much each of these teams play their starters, is that you have three pretty decent defenses. Like the Bengals, the Patriots, and Seahawks aren't going to be washes if they play their starters, which I don't think they will too much. But um, I'm glad it's not three stinkers for Jordan Love to go against. I'd like to see him actually
yeah.
get some reps in against some quality defenses before they throw him right into week 1.
I did find something that we did not cover.
Okay.
Joe Barry on Eric Stokes. I'm going to be lifting these quotes from Matt Schneeman's, basically, essentially doing what we're doing right now, but talking about comments from assistant coaches and coordinators. On Eric Stokes, reading between the lines, it doesn't sound like the return of cornerback Eric Stokes, the 2021 first round pick, is imminent. Joe Barry says Eric had a pretty substantial injury. He's on the road to recovery. He's been in the building every single day. It's great to just see him walking around and being here. Next time I talk to him, hopefully I'll have a little bit more to report on, but we'll see where he goes day to day. Um, on Monday, when we start OTAs with Eric not even being able to practice, we feel like we've got two pretty good outside quarters in John Razul and a Keyshawn who, and he goes, yeah. So basically saying,
Not great.
not great. No.
Injured his knee, right? His knee.
And they didn't even, well, Matt
I guess
even says it too.
they never really specified, right?
Nope.
So that was November 6th.
I don't even remember seeing it, but because they didn't replay the injury
Yeah.
too. Is that bad?
Yeah, that was November 6th.
Yeah.
So just about 2 months, 7 months away since his injury. So can't be that good if he's still not practicing and being on the field for like just OTAs and stuff like that. If he's not doing any workouts, so here's to hoping
So,
they can get him
eh,
this year and it doesn't really turn into a Dave Bakhtiari sort of albatross situation. But
well, I mean, at this point,
it might be that if they
it might be a
they
multi-year recovery,
yeah
especially for a cornerback.
yeah that's tough.
Um,
That's tough for Stokes. That sucks.
yeah. So definitely something to monitor.
At least we got a better update than we would from the Bucks. if the,
Yes and no. I mean, there's still not like saying what is actually wrong with him or what
I
he
mean, I
suffered.
guess, but I think if it was the Bucks, they'd be like, he's alive.
He has a pulse. I saw him at the. I mean, that's what they're basically doing.
Right.
I saw him. I saw him in practice. He's walking around just great.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. All right, Jordan. Anything else?
No. No, I think that's it.
Sweet. Couple of promotions, as always. You know the deal. Go check out Repod, our favorite place to listen to podcasts. Got the whole community, comment section, native playback for your Talk of the Tundra and other GSPN podcasts. So join repod.com/talk of the tundra to get that link and join there. All the GSPN shows, Cruising for a Bruising, Talk of the Tundra, Eurostep 1 and 6, and Make Time for This can all be found at gspn.info. The Bucks boys, Jordan, Ty, Adam, and Rohan, all talked the vast amount of coaching coaching options that the Bucks are interviewing. Word on the campfire is that you, Jordan Tresky,
No.
are going in for an interview for the Bucks head
Yeah,
coach.
they've added 10 more names since we literally wrapped that podcast at the start of the week.
Yeah. So
And this search might break my will.
your sanity.
It's not great. It's not great.
So go check out the Bucks feed to listen to that podcast. It was a good one. Cruising for a Bruising is posted their recap podcast of the Cardinal series today, as they go into now a weekend series with the Tampa Bay Rays down in Florida. So go check that out. From you, Jordan, Adam, Andrew, and Ty all talked Succession in sort of the latest mid-season recap of the final season of that show. Very sad I couldn't make it, but go check it out. I listened to it today. It was very, very good. Make time for this. Go check it out. So, I think that just about wraps it up, right?
Yeah. No.
Sweet. So, all right,
We
everybody.
sufficiently talked Tundra.
We did. We did. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it. You'll hear from us soon once again in all of your regular places. And thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.